In June 2019, I vacationed in Las Vegas for the third time in my life, but it would be the first time I actually stayed right on the Strip. My girlfriend and I stayed at the Flamingo, near the center of all the action. Directly to the south of the Flamingo, and across Flamingo Road, stands Bally's Las Vegas. Today, Bally's is a large complex consisting of two large towers, but when construction on the complex started back in 1972, only one tower was constructed, which stood in the shape of a capital T. Dubbed the original Mgm Grand Hotel and Casino. Upon the structure's completion and opening in December 1973, it was deemed the largest hotel in the world. The MGM Grand was the brainchild of Kirk Kerkorian, an American working businessman of Armenian descent who had purchased the film studio MGM Studios in 1969. Understandably then, upon its completion, the MGM Grand was predominantly film and cinematically themed. But for all its initial pomp and grandeur, under the surface, the hotel and casino had cut numerous corners in its construction, violating numerous codes and engaging in several design flaws. It was these gross mistakes that would culminate in one of the greatest hotel tragedies in the history of America. Knowing while I was on vacation that I was so close to this history, I knew I'd have to take a walk through what, again, today is Bally's. Bally's had purchased the property in 1986 for just under $600 million. But from 1973 until 1986, it was the renowned MGM Grand. Originally, the Three Coins Motel was built on the property in 1963, and later the Bonanza Hotel and Casino was constructed there in 1967. After the Bonanza declared bankruptcy in 1970, a portion of the property was purchased by Kirk Kerkorian, and the Bonanza actually remained standing for a while, even after construction began on the MGM Grand in 1972. During the construction of the MGM Grand, one of the Vegas's earlier massive resort properties, the local fire marshal was kept out of early planning, and despite pressure to invest $192,000 into putting a sprinkler system in the hotel, the decision was ultimately made not to do so. Only certain parts of the structure were equipped with sprinklers, including some conference areas, portions of the top floor, which would be the 26th floor, and one restaurant, the Barrymore Room. Of great significance was that building codes at the time did not require a sprinkler system in establishments that ran 24 hours. One of the MGM Grand's eateries, when it opened, called the Deli, was one such 24-hour joint. The presumption was, operating 24 hours a day, there would always be someone there to watch over the place and catch emergencies right away. Emergencies such as fires. However, by 1980, the Deli was no longer functioning as a 24-hour establishment. Therefore, in the early morning hours of November 21st, 1980, the Deli restaurant loomed empty. Doris Kitzmiller, head hostess at several of the MGM Grand's eateries, including the Deli, shut it down at 1:10 a.m. Before leaving at approximately 2:30 a.m., she checked the Deli one last time. She noticed nothing out of the ordinary. However, the day before, Gene Hartman, who worked a gift shop in the MGM Grand's basement, arrived at work around 8:45 a.m. and claimed to see a haziness in the air, as well as smelling something she equated to car exhaust. After 10 minutes, the smell dissipated, and Hartman noticed nothing strange after that. But her account would end up being tragically foreshadowing. Overnight employee Raymond Yeager reported checking in on the Deli 3 times overnight on the 21st, the last time being during the 6 a.m. hour. He also noticed nothing out of the ordinary. Little did any of these people realize, that behind the wall of the deli, that there was literally a fire beginning to brew. At approximately 7:07 a.m., within an hour of Yeager's last check, an inspection crew was on the scene near the deli to check for any damaged tiles. One of the workers, Tim Connor, began hearing a crackling sound before noticing the reflection of what appeared to be flickering in the area. In checking on this in the deli, he discovered a wall of flames. The lack of any employees on the scene, coupled with the fact that the deli had no smoke detectors, kept the fire from being noticed right away and potentially being contained. After this discovery, Connor immediately contacted security in the building via telephone and ran to find something to put the fire out. But by the time he found an extinguisher and came back to the scene, the flames had fully engulfed the deli, and he knew his efforts would be futile. Nearby, a chef named Kent Oborn attempted to spray down what appeared to be a fire sparking on the casino's keno board, which happened to be near the deli, but he was abruptly stopped, being warned to not spray water on an electrical fire. The fire spread rapidly from its place of origin near the back side of the casino floor. It first climbed the walls of the deli and then moved along the ceiling, fueling itself with the eatery's decor and wallpaper. The casino had more than enough to fuel the fire as well, including mirrors, drainage piping, and even the coins in the slot machines, all of which were made of flammable plastic. The fire ultimately started spreading at almost 20 feet per second, having the whole casino area engulfed in only 6 minutes. Alice Brown, a casino cashier, first heard word of the fire as she was getting off her shift, and by the time she made it out into the parking lot, she could already see flames spreading outside from the building. The building and building of combustibles peaked by blowing out the entrance near the valet parking area, torching everything in its vicinity. Even more problematic than the rapid spreading of this fire was the toxic smoke it produced through the various items it burned along the way. At 7:17 a.m., roughly 10 minutes after the fire's discovery, the Clark County Fire Department was called. Fortunately, the department's station number 11 was located right across the street from the Mgm Grand, and they were on the scene within 2 minutes. Ultimately, numerous other departments from the Las Vegas-Henderson area helped in combating the fire. The firefighters were extremely effective in their efforts, getting the fire under control in less than 2 hours while maintaining it to the casino floor of the building.
Good evening. At least 75 people have died today in a fire in the biggest hotel in Las Vegas. Another 300 were injured. The fire was in the Mgm Grand Hotel and Casino, which was built in 1973.
The fire began shortly after 7 in the morning and spread throughout the ground floor casino and the famous showroom in a matter of minutes, sending thick black smoke up through the entire 26-story structure. The Grand has more than 2,000 rooms. There were believed to be some 4,500 guests in the hotel.
In the end, 85 people perished as a result of this blaze, with more than 600 patrons also being injured. At the time, it was considered the second deadliest hotel fire in the history of America, and, to this day, is the most deadliest tragedy in the history of Nevada. Of the dead, 78 were guests and 7 were employees of the MGM Grand. Conventional wisdom might lead outsiders to believe the majority of these victims were in the vicinity of the fire and were burned to death. However, the reality is that 75 of the 85 victims died as a result of smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide poisoning. Only 18 of those who perished were on the casino floor level. This massive distinction in terms of how these victims died would reveal a troubling and tragic string of code violations, design flaws, and improper construction that left this seemingly state-of-the-art Vegas attraction a disaster waiting to happen. Rescue helicopters were flown in from the nearby Nellis Air Force Base and were beyond invaluable as they rescued hundreds of patrons of the hotel who sought refuge on its rooftop. But despite this positive, there were those who questioned the usage of these helicopters as their loudness kept confused hotel guests from being able to hear any potential reports or instructions coming from firefighters down below.
Take the helicopters the hell away from there for a minute. Get somebody on that roof with the megaphone and tell those people what to do. They can't hear anything.
But at the same time, guests who survived the fire were flustered at the fact that they were left completely in the dark about what was happening. No calls, no warnings, no fire alarm with directions on what to do in that moment. Because of this, many guests in the hotel did not know what to do in the immediate situation. As word spread of a fire being in progress, many guests broke out the windows of their rooms to presumably breathe in clean air and to maybe even call down for help. However, within minutes, the area surrounding the Grand's tower was surrounded with toxic smoke, the chemicals of which guests were not only breathing in from the outside by breaking their windows, but also they were allowing these toxins to enter their room, creating a complete toxic environment all around them. Furthermore, the construction of the Grand's tower left it open to the spread of toxic smoke coming from way down on the casino floor. Openings, called seismic joints, there to help the tower in the event of an earthquake, allowed smoke to funnel up from the casino level, expelling smoke from the rooftop of the MGM Grand. This helped the spread of smoke from the fire, but also the MGM Grand's air conditioning units were on the roof, catching much of this smoke and just sucking it back into the building and releasing it through the building's ventilation system into many and unknowing guests' rooms. Dusts and particles carried in this smoke would be found near vents in several hotel rooms after the fire. The accompanying stairwells and elevator shafts in the building also created space for smoke to funnel in and then be carried to higher floors. In the aftermath investigation into the matter, it was found that the MGM Grand did have an evacuation plan in place. However, it was not posted in any of the public areas of the resort. Thus, practically none of the patrons there had any clue how to respond in the event of a necessary evacuation. This evacuation plan only allowed for exiting through the use of the tower's exterior stairwells. But since this information was not readily available throughout the complex, most guests who tried to escape used the seemingly more logical interior stairwells and elevators to try and escape. This proved to be doubly tragic, as many of these guests would become stranded and die in these specific areas, but also by accessing the doors to these stairwells and elevator shafts, they open the halls on various floors up to allowing an increased amount of toxic smoke that could then penetrate the rooms on those floors. In the end, 10 deceased victims were found in the elevators of the building, and 9 were found in its stairwells. Unable to escape and overwhelmed by the toxins, in the end, all the elevator shafts failed when the heat accessing their shafts stretched and eventually broke the cables supporting the cars, leaving them useless in any escape effort afterward. To make matters worse, the exterior evacuation-focused stairwells were also covered, and even they were penetrated by this toxic smoke. Even the plumbing at the MGM Grand proved dangerous, as smoke was able to make it up through the building's plumbing and come out through sinks and bathtub faucets. There seemed to be no place that toxins could not penetrate in the building during this fire. Those who got the worst of it were higher up in the building, between the 20th and 25th floors. All in all, 61 of the 85 who died were definitively shown to have died in the upper portion of the complex. Specifically, 14 victims were found dead on the 20th floor, 8 on the 21st floor, 3 on the 22nd floor, 14 on the 23rd floor, 9 on the 24th floor, and 7 on the 25th floor. Some people's bodies appeared to have actually been relocated after their death, for whatever reason. 3 deceased individuals were ultimately discovered on the rooftop of the MGM Grand. 25 of the deceased were in rooms, while 22 were found in various hallways and corridors. One woman even died of a severe skull fracture after either falling or possibly jumping from several stories up in the building. On the casino level, 6 people perished in the area of the registration desk. 4 died in a place on the floor called the Ritz Room, and 2 died in the elevator lobby. On the day after the fire, another victim, a female employee at the MGM Grand, was discovered in a service elevator on the 26th floor. One victim ultimately perished weeks after the fire in a hospital in Houston, Texas. One of the most abrupt lessons learned from this tragedy was that it wasn't a lack of response to the fire that was the problem. The fire department was on the scene almost immediately and did contain the fire. It was the lack of having proper protective measures in the first place that allowed this tragedy to occur. In the smoldering aftermath, it was determined quickly that had a sprinkler system been in place in that building, the fire would have been easily controlled, limiting the damage and the potential for toxins to spread.
Fire investigator Mike Patterson.
If there had been sprinklers in there, we'd have had some water damage pour down in that deli area, and that would have been it. That would have been it. That's as far as it would have gone.
I feel personally that all we would have been doing at this particular hotel was vacuuming out water rather than putting out fire.
Negligence such as this would lead to a succession of lawsuits after this fire, totaling in a settlement of some $223 million to the affected parties, when they could have just spent $192,000 on a sprinkler system. The fire alarm at the MGM Grand also functioned manually, meaning it did not go off unless someone pulled it, and, likely in the panic, nobody took the time to pull the alarm. This was another thing that prevented guests on the property from knowing what was happening, even though it, ironically some have argued, actually may have saved lives, as the lack of an alarm going off delayed patrons from fleeing downstairs and into the belly of the beast where the fire was blazing and the smoke was its most deadly. Even the origin of the fire itself, coming from the wiring from a refrigeration display at the deli, was the result of something easily preventable. Over the course of 2 inspections done in December 1980 after the fire, it was determined the fire came as a result of a ground fault. the result of improper installation and wiring behind an outlet used to operate a refrigerated display case. This ground fault was the result of multiple factors, all coming as a result of negligent construction that led to overheating to the point of creating sparking that ultimately brought about flames. Due to this, the fire itself was a long time coming, but once the sparks became fire, it was anything but slow in its development. But this faulty revelation was only the beginning. The aftermath investigation into the matter revealed a staggering 83 code violations the MGM Grand had engaged in. And it's no wonder then that they found themselves getting sued to the tune of over $200 million. February 10th, 1981. 81 days after the MGM Grand Fire, a fire broke out at the Las Vegas Hilton, today the Westgate. Strangely enough, the Hilton suffered many of the same problems as the MGM Grand, as they were in the process of putting new safety measures in place, but were not finished. There were a total of 8 fatalities and 200 injuries in this fire that was ultimately deemed to be an arson when a young bellboy named Philip Klein broke down under questioning and admitted to accidentally setting a room on fire. However, investigations of the crime found his story questionable at best, while also discovering origins of fire set on 4 different floors, not just in one room. Klein would ultimately be given 8 life sentences plus 15 years for his actions. With so many preventable aspects to the MGM Grand's fire, coupled with another Vegas hotel fire happening in such close proximity, major regulatory changes would follow, changes that would have even international implications. The MGM Grand would install a complete sprinkler system, as well as an automatic fire alarm to immediately alert patrons in the building when a fire had occurred. New Nevada regulations also forced the MGM Grand to install smoke detectors and emergency exit maps in all their hotel rooms. Buildings were also required to have unlocked stairwell doors, and if any doors were locked, they needed to be set to unlock the moment a fire was detected. As a result of these new actions, Nevada would ultimately end up becoming an American trendsetter in the area of building safety. Less than a year after the fire, the MGM Grand had been fully renovated and back into action. For the next few years, the property would stay open as the MGM Grand until 1986, when the property was sold to Bally's. The Grand would ultimately reopen on the site of the old Marina Hotel, just south of its original site, in 1993. With Bally's purchasing the old property, it reopened as Bally's Las Vegas, as it remains to this day. Both intriguing and unfortunate, as is the case for many tragedies involving death. Possibly the most lingering aspect of the MGM Grand Fire of 1980 are the reports of hauntings and urban legends that have come from there ever since. It almost appears as though the moment the property was changed to Bally's, the reports started coming in. In the past, people have reported hearing screams in the building's stairwells, the smell of smoke on upper floors with no source to it, and strange happenings such as toilets flushing by themselves. Most well known as far as spirits haunting Bally's include a boy on a high-up floor, most often the 17th floor, screaming out before turning to coughing and ultimately fading into silence. Another reported spirit is an older woman sitting at a slot machine and smoking a cigarette. But the closer one comes to the spirit, the more the smoke from her cigarette becomes smoke from the hem of her dress as it has suddenly caught fire. Back in the summer of 2016, on a whim, before knowing much about the history of this fire, my girlfriend and I were vacationing in Vegas and walked through the Bally's, hoping, again on a whim, that maybe we would see a spirit of some kind. As far as I could tell, we saw nothing. During this more recent vacation, I certainly kept my eyes and ears open for anything of intrigue. While I explored the halls of Bally's, my girlfriend played Pokemon Go up there and had, herself, at least an interesting little experience.
I didn't take a picture of the ghost, but...
Yeah.
I'll show you. There's the Cubone.
And the Cubone is the one that lost its mother.
Yep. And then...
Wow. And that's the ghostly one, so a lot of ghosts, spirits, people passing type things. Maybe it's a coincidence.
While playing Pokemon Go on the 25th floor, she caught 2 Pokemon specifically. She caught a Cubone Pokemon for the first time ever, and she's played the game for several years since it first started. Cubone just happens to be a Pokemon that cries over the loss of its mother. She also ended up catching a Mischievous, which just happens to be a ghost Pokemon. Again, probably nothing, but still interesting. There have been a boatload of stories posted on a variety of different websites and forums documenting people's accounts of staying at Bally's and having a plethora of strange experiences that could be the result of something paranormal, something oddly coincidental, or, of course, some might just be made up. Whether they are real and whether any of these haunted stories are true is really up to whatever one's beliefs may be. While the potential for a haunted place is always tempting and obviously captures my own intrigue, it's critical to remember what's most important: the memories of the fallen, along with the lessons learned and regulations passed to hopefully prevent similar tragedies in the future. assume this is a restaurant. Yeah, it's just an exit. But yeah, this would be. Yeah. So this makes sense because all these places are in the back. They said it was a place called like the Deli or something like that. Yeah.
They just used it, especially in 1980, to have more like.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, I'm assuming this was one of the, we're in the right building.
Yeah.
guess you can.